Hello, I'm Cheryl McCarthy. Welcome to One to One. Since it opened more than 90 years ago, the Riverside Church has been a catalyst for liberal, social, political, and religious activism, and a podium for world leaders from Nelson Mandela to the Dalai Lama. So the arrival of a new leader is always a subject of public interest. The Reverend Adrienne Thorne was recently installed as the church's 8th senior minister. We'll talk to her about how the pandemic has affected church attendance, about the Protestant Church's response to women in top leadership positions, and about how she views the mission of the church going forward. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
What drew you to Riverside?
Riverside is a complicated place. I have a lot of friends who have been members or who have served there, and it's challenging. But a friend reached out and said, if there's anyone I think that could fill this role, it's you. And I think the first time I heard that, I laughed. But looking at the job description, I think it felt like a fit. The number one thing the church was looking for when the search happened was a minister who embodied pastoral care. And that is my area of focus. Healing is my great love. It's something I've known that is a gift for me since I was a little child. So I looked at it a little more closely then.
Over the years, Riverside Church has been the place that has hosted the funerals of prominent people from all walks of life and has provided a forum for important civic and spiritual leaders. In recent years, it seems, and maybe this is related to the pandemic, it has been as much in the public eye. Is the church less engaged in influencing social and political thought as it was, say, in the 60s and 70s, do you think?
I would say no, that's not the case. I think Riverside and the church writ large continue to be influential in certain circles. I think not being at the center of the national conversation may have more to say about media than it does about the church. We continue to do our work in our neighborhood, serving our neighbors, feeding hungry folks, caring for asylum seekers. But I think if we are honest, the news media is often looking for things that are more controversial. Those are the things they've tended to cover about Riverside.
Yeah. How's the church been affected by the pandemic?
I think like most churches, we've been affected by membership and people's comfort level with coming back. But I think one of the good things for the church in general, and I think for Riverside in particular, is this move to hybrid worship. What it allows is for elders, for seniors who may find getting to church a struggle, easier to be connected. Those who've left the city are still able to be a part of their faith community because of the online opportunity. And I also find that parents with young children, you know, church actually comes at a time that's not good for babies. Usually 11 o'clock is nap time. So there are a lot of people for whom I think the church was not a hospitable place who are now able to be in community because of the pandemic.
In the interest of open disclosure, I have to say that I am a member of Riverside Church, even though I don't attend regularly. Back in the 90s, I sang in the sanctuary choir, so I have connections to Riverside. And one of my observations is that Riverside is really a truly racially integrated church in a way that many churches are not. You know, most churches, it's a overwhelmingly Black church, it's a Latino church, it's a white church, but Riverside is really an integrated church. Why do you think that is?
I really believe the message of the social gospel is appealing across race, gender, social class. I think people at our core want to be connected to a community of faith that says God loves all the people and attempts to live that out, that is trying to feed the hungry and visit the imprisoned. And Riverside has been doing that for 93 years. And so I think people find their way to our doors.
And it doesn't hurt that it's right at the on the borderline of Harlem and the West Side.
Yes.
So it's well located to have a diverse membership. You are the second woman to serve as senior minister of the church. Are more women entering seminaries these days?
Yes, I would say, Cheryl, that's been a trend for probably the last maybe 30 years. Protestant denominations started ordaining women in the 70s, and I think with that, women were certainly attending seminary before that, but I think with that opportunity to take one's theological degree and answer God's call to lead and serve in the church, we are seeing more women. And women now outstrip men in seminaries.
Really?
Yes, they do. They do. I think it's 60 to 40. I might be a little bit off, but we are the leading attenders of seminary.
Polls show that a slight majority of ministers at mainstream churches say that they think their church would accept a woman as senior pastor. Do you see this happening in reality?
That's a complicated question. I think everyone
Or
wants
are they
to,
just being politically correct? What do you?
I think it's maybe a blend. I don't think many churches, particularly progressive ones, want to say, we don't want a woman. So there is a little, perhaps, political correctness, in the same way that I don't think anyone wants to say we don't want a person of color, or we don't perhaps want a LGBTQ plus person. But in reality, and this has been my experience as I've interviewed over 20 plus years in ministry, I would often get down to the final 3 or the final 2 candidates and lose out to a man, generally a white man. And so I think in our collective imagination, because for so long the leaders of our churches, our presidents, the Supreme Court justices have been men, whether people want it in their heart or not, I think their brains tell them ministers look like men, often straight white men who are married to women and have children.
Now, far more women attend church than men.
Yes.
I mean, some churches it's 70%, maybe even more. Baptist churches, certainly, including Black Baptist churches, I believe, bar women from being senior minister. And in fact, the Southern Baptist Convention, which is the largest Protestant denomination in the country, recently ousted, I think, 5 churches because they allowed women to serve as pastors. Why is the issue so divisive?
I think it's divisive in the way that the Bible is divisive. You certainly can find text that says women should listen to their husbands, women should not speak in church. I think that's where people go when they are looking to uphold this tradition. And we've been trained. Women, men, children have been trained that the head of a household is a man, the head of a church is a man. And so I think to be trying to do something different in an ancient religious context is hard for people. I think for some people it feels like we are trying to change who God is and trying to change this understanding of faith that has existed for over 2,000 years.
Because God was a white guy with a long white beard.
Absolutely. Also, God is omniscient. God doesn't make mistakes. So all of that stuff gets put into the hopper, and these sorts of, I would say, quite frankly, toxic understandings of God and the church come out. Yes.
Which denominations have been the most receptive to women as head pastors?
I would say the Methodists, I think, have probably ordained women first. I might be off on that. The Presbyterians have certainly been welcoming. The United Church of Christ has been welcoming. Those are the 3 that come to mind.
Do you think that a woman senior minister faces special challenges? I'm sure it's always going to be a challenge to lead a church like complex church, big complex like Riverside. But do you think a woman senior minister faces special challenges in leading that type of congregation that perhaps a male minister would not?
Absolutely, without a doubt. I think that women show up in whatever spaces we show up in, and it's challenging just to be Ketanji Brown Jackson on the Supreme Court, me at Riverside, the woman who's now leading Harvard. So you've got the challenges of leadership, but you've also got the added challenges of being female. I have found them to be things like people trying to helpfully tell you how to do your job, suggesting that you might want to lead in this way, things that I think in a different reversal of roles would not be said to a man and would probably not be said to a white person. I think in the same way. We're not, I believe, thought to be as competent, as organized, as knowledgeable, as excellent as others in the field. And I do think that is part of the gender issue in leadership.
It's been said that church politics, perhaps along with academic politics, are among the most ferocious kinds of politics that exist. Have you found this? Now, you've been the head of 3 churches and probably been at many others. Do you find that that's true? Have you found that that's true?
I would say church politics are more ferocious than academic politics, and here's the reason why. Being a person of faith is a soul issue, it's a heart issue. And so when there are politics where people get hurt, the pain of church politics, I think, is more powerful than the pain of academic politics. My sister's a dean, and that whole tenure thing is certainly painful. Not bringing someone into that community is painful. But when you touch someone's understanding of who God is, you're often touching their identity, their worthiness. And so I think that's why it's more ferocious in the church than in the academy.
Are there support groups for women ministers? Or should there be if there aren't?
There certainly should be. I think, though, like in many industries, we start our own. So I have a sister circle of women that I pray with, clergy, every week. And I have a larger sister circle, and we call ourselves the Divine Nine, because there were 9 of us who support each other and have supported each other through ministry transitions. They're very necessary, these groups.
I was fascinated when I learned about your background, that for 20 years you were a dancer. I don't know if you were a singer as well, but in the entertainment business. Tell me about that period of your life.
Yes, so I started classical ballet training when I was 7. I studied here in New York at the School of American Ballet, which is connected to New York City Ballet. I was there for 2 summers, and then they said, you're going to be too tall. I'm 5'10" and a half.
Okay.
And most ballerinas in the 80s when I was studying are about 5'6", 5'7". There was one who was 5'8", and she was considered a giant. So I'm 2.5 inches taller than the giant. But I loved ballet. I loved the creativity of it. Transitioned to musical theater. That's when I did begin learning how to sing, because ballet dancers don't talk. And just had a wonderful career after that, and concluded as a Radio City Rockette before I went to serve a church and then went to seminary.
What was it like being a Rockette?
It was a very special and complicated opportunity. I was hired at a time in the year 2000. So Radio City was wanting to diversify the line. They were getting a lot of pushback from their sponsors that the line did not reflect New York City. So I was brought in along with 10 other women, ultimately women of color, who were hired. And by and large, there was a warm welcome. But as you might imagine, there were folks who felt that their friends lost their jobs because of us. I got pushed in rehearsal.
Really? By another
dancer. People who made it clear that they thought we didn't belong, that we were only there because of our skin color, that we actually couldn't do the job, that we somehow didn't deserve to be there as much as they deserved to be there. But I think, as a woman and as a person of color, that is often the assumption that somehow a special door has been opened for you.
No matter what the field.
No matter how hard you've worked, no
Right.
matter the field, you somehow got in a special way. But I have to shout out a white Rockette friend of mine who said, do you think these people got in here because they're so talented? No. She said, it costs a lot of money to build these costumes. They can fit the costume. They may know somebody. So some of the Rockettes were extraordinary dancers, and many are just, regular dancers. There's 36 women on that line, so probably all 36 are not going to be excellent, but they're good enough to be part of this elite team. So it was a joy to be there for the most part.
I remember the debate about, why aren't there any Rockettes of color? And I remember that the woman who was, I don't remember her position, but she was in charge of the line at that point said, well, we don't want to mess up the uniformity of the line.
Break the line.
Right,
Cannot
exactly.
break the line. Yes. The thing is, though, if you've been in the music hall, it seats 5,000 people. Once you get more than 3 rows from the stage, you can't really tell. The way the show is lit, the way we're costumed, our hats usually sit here, and our costume necks come up to here, so you can see this much of our face. And so it's very difficult, and we're also moving very quickly in and out of patterns. And I think New York City, I think what the sponsors were saying was true. New Yorkers want to see themselves reflected in these iconic places like the Radio City Music Hall Rockettes.
You're also a scuba diver, I understand.
am.
Oh my God. Unusual qualifications for a senior minister.
These are just coincidences. But the church I served before seminary, I just went to try out an internship with a mentor who said, come and work for me for a year before you spend all this money going to seminary. See if you actually like it. And that church happened to be in St. Thomas in the U.S. Virgin Islands.
Okay.
And so I was able to fulfill this dream to become a certified scuba diver. So it is the best experience to be underwater, 60, 80 feet underwater with the fish and the silence, no cell phones, no children. It's a beautiful place to be.
So what made you decide to make the transition from being a dancer to a minister?
Yeah. I think I experienced my call when I was little, probably 6 or 7 years old, understanding myself as a healer. And it's interesting, when I was dancing, a mother of one of my dancer colleagues said to me, "It is so healing watching you dance." I had musicians in the studio who would say, "You're a healer." It was very odd that people were naming these things in me. So there's a way in which I feel like the call has been coming since I was a child, and it wasn't such a difficult shift to make the move over. It was this clergy person in the Virgin Islands who said, "Have you ever thought about going to seminary?" And that was a 4-year process of him asking when I said, maybe I do want to look at this. I've always loved the church. And my mother said to me, I always knew you'd end up there. Yeah, so.
I've known journalists who, after wonderful careers as journalists, became ministers, and lawyers who became ministers. And I always thought that it would be lovely to go from a career where you focused on my individual achievements, and climbing the ladder, to a profession that is about service to other people.
Yeah.
I would think that would be a really rewarding transition to make.
It is very rewarding. I'm an odd performer, though, because I'm not an extrovert. Most folks that are on the stage love being on the stage, love the spotlight. I love performing and I love dancing, but when I come out the stage door and people want autographs, I'm like, I just want to go home. I'm tired. And so for me, I feel like energetically, who I was as a performer really matches who I am as a minister. I'm really not trying to be famous or to give autographs. My goal and my job, I feel, is to make Christ known. And so I don't have a problem stepping back and pushing the good news forward.
I was reading, I guess from the church website, that there are 14 ministries at Riverside that work to identify and address specific areas of human need. Tell me about some of them.
Yes, so we have an anti-racism task force. We have a group, Sojourners, that works with issues at the border. We have
working with immigrants and refugees.
Immigrants, refugees, asylum seekers. Our Maranatha group, I'm told, is one of the oldest LGBTQ plus friendly groups in a church in the country. So we do a lot of work around advocacy for that community. There is also an organization that meets with folks in the park and does ministry with people who are unhoused and in a park setting. It is a lot, as you suggested, to have 14 ministries trying to do the work of love and justice in the world, but they've actually been able in the last 2 years to focus their work in 3 areas, and those areas are equity, democracy, and the earth. So that is really what's getting our energy right now, those 3 areas of need.
Okay. When I was there, the church sponsored a boys basketball team. Does that still exist?
The Hawks. The Riverside Hawks have been in existence for over 60 years. Our fourth grade boys won the national championship
Oh my goodness.
This year, so we're very proud of them. They are still in existence, and I run into so many people in the city who are like, oh, when I was a child, I used to play basketball at the Riverside Church. All different stripes of people and walks of life, and that's really encouraging and joyful.
What do you see as the biggest challenges facing Riverside right now?
Yes, I think we are looking more outside of our walls and are concerned about the things that our members are concerned about. I think top of the list is racial equity, gun violence, what's happening in our nation that's pulling apart the fabric. I mean, we are a church that believes that everyone belongs because the Bible says we love God and we love our neighbor, particularly our enemies, with everything we've got. And so we're looking at what's happening with laws, attacks on trans children and their families, gun violence being the #1 killer of our children, and just looking at how this notion of community is really pulling apart. And I think our members are looking to Riverside, but I think to the church to do something about that in the vein of civil rights struggle, where we are galvanizing and partnering and moving the needle on issues that are affecting people in our country.
Has there been anything that has really surprised you about your experience at Riverside so far?
It is surprising that churches are so similar, regardless of their size, their historic legacy, their budget. They really are a collection of people who are looking to belong, who are looking to be seen and to be loved. Very often they're people who are coming with hurts, personal hurts, racial, ethnic hurts, communal hurts, and they're hoping that somebody's going to see them, that someone's going to tend to them. And I think if there is a surprise, it's that regardless of demographic, budget, churches are really all the same.
It's really as much about finding community as it is about any kind of biblical kind of quest. What a church is about finding community.
I think it's about finding community, and I think the biblical quest, Cheryl, is this notion of, do you love me? Does somebody love me? Do I matter enough to people and to God? I think one of the most challenging things for us as human beings is to believe that there is a God who thinks we're to die for. I think we can't believe it. And so I think folk come to church looking for that. Are you going to love me? And in you loving me, is God going to love me?
What priorities have you set for your time as senior minister of the church?
Healing is my jam. And what I keep reminding our community is that we went through something and we're still going through it. The pandemic, the lockdown, I would say the 4 years of the previous administration. And I think watching all of this gun violence and the way it's impacting our children, we're going through something. And so we do a lot of embodied work at Riverside. I have them breathe, I have them stretch, to create space in their spirit and their body to receive the heaviness of this moment. And to move that body side to side, only do what feels good, and to move that body front and back, creating a little more space, a little more freedom, and giving thanks that you have the ability to move as you are able to move, giving thanks that you have the leisure to engage in such a practice that you would not be free to engage if you were enslaved. Amen? Let your arms go. So I think our work right now is healing, not just our community, but being connected in our neighborhood, which is also hurting. We are not far from the Grant Houses. It's a New York City public housing authority building. So wanting to be in relationship with our institutions and be a part of the healing and the betterment of the neighborhood.
So to our viewers out there, what do you want them to know about Riverside Church?
I want them to know that Riverside is a welcoming place. We really do welcome all of the people. But I think what we're realizing now in the 21st century is that welcome is not just come to worship with us on a Sunday morning. There are people who don't believe in God, but who I think believe in what we're doing in terms of healing and justice. And so we want to get outside of the walls of the church and connect with all of the things that are going on in the world. Christian church, I think, needs to recognize in this 21st century that not everyone is going to come in. That 11 o'clock on Sunday morning isn't the space for everybody, but there are places where I think people are hoping and expecting that the church will come out and touch them and tend to them and get to know them.
Well, welcome to Riverside Church, and good luck in moving forward and achieving all your objectives.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Great to be here with you.
I'm afraid we're out of time. I want to thank the Reverend Adrienne Thorne, the 8th Senior Minister of the Riverside Church, for joining me today. To learn about our upcoming shows, you can follow us on Twitter at One2One CUNY TV. For the City University of New York and One2One, I'm Cheryl McCarthy.